Hello, Blazer fans, Blazers Edge readers. Welcome to another edition of the Blazers Edge Videocast. I'm Sam Tung, along with Dave Decker. We have an email question for you today. It's a little grim. We're gonna have to kind of go into the more grim territory today, Dave. But as a reminder, blazersub@gmail.com, the place that you can send all of those emails, and please do so. Continue to send those in for both Dave's mailbag versions of his text versions of the mailbags, as well as these videocasts. Our email today is coming from Cody, and Cody writes in, how disastrous would the implications be if the Blazers don't make the playoffs this year, and what do you think the fallout would be? Stotts fired, LaMarcus wanting out of Portland, make an aggressive move to upgrade the bench or a current starter. Strange how we go from talks to how well Portland would do in a 7-game series to can they actually blow this and end up the 9th seed. Love to hear your thoughts. Thanks. Again, that from Cody. So Dave, the fact that we have to have this conversation, I think, is a little frustrating for most people, and I don't necessarily believe that this is what's going to happen, but it is a possibility. So, wanted your thoughts on what would happen to the team and what would be sort of the snowball effect if the team weren't to make the playoffs after the type of start that they had to this year.
Well, how disastrous it would be would depend on the lottery ping pong balls. Yes, not making the playoffs and then having your pick go to Charlotte on top of that would be a disaster of Nick-like proportions. However, if you got a nice lottery pick as a consolation prize, wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world. It would be one of the most disappointing things in the world, but you know what? You'd feel better come June, and that's only a month away. So, unfortunately, the pick is only top 12 protected, which leaves a couple of spots in which the Blazers would likely finish. And so the likelihood would be high, absent luck, that if the Blazers didn't make the playoffs, they also would not get their pick. And then we get to have sad face all summer long. So we don't want that. We want Portland to make the postseason, not just because then they have a chance to get experience in advance, but because the alternative is semi-unthinkable at this point. Now, what would the fallout be? I think two of those options are in play that Cody mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think Coach Stotts, already they have not extended his contract, and they're going to have discussions this summer. I have been a proponent of Terry Stotts and have made no bones about that. I've also been worried that Stotts has been dealt a hand that's basically no win, that unless he absolutely excels beyond measure, which it looked like he was going to do early but hasn't been so much, that basically he's been a caretaker for this team. And when this team either gets really good or really bad, that they will look to make another choice, not because of any internal quality of his or not because I'm down on him, but because I think that's how this has been set up. I don't think that he can succeed entirely with this roster, and I think rather than changing the roster, they will change him. Also, I think LaMarcus Aldridge, that issue has never been off the table, despite the giddy proclamations early on in the year when it looked like the Blazers were world beaters. They still have to convince LaMarcus that this is the place to be. He still has to convince them that he is worth a max contract. There's still doubt that those two will meet in time to make, his future assured here. So missing the playoffs makes that situation even worse, obviously. So you have those two problems. The thing I think that won't happen is a radical overhaul, simply because how do you do that? You've got the mid-level exception, and you've got a bunch of bench players that, again, have performed like among the worst in the NBA this year. Who's going to want them? So I think there's possibility for some moves there, but a radical move, time for that was probably the trade deadline.
Well, I think that the way you could do a radical move, Dave, is by shipping one of those guys out for a draft pick, come draft day. That seems like that would be the way that you could accommodate something like that. A team like Phoenix that has a ton of draft picks. You send one of your not Damian Lillard or LaMarcus Aldridge, really, that would be the way you would do it. I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen. I mean, I can't imagine it'll happen. I think the team's going to make the playoffs anyways. But I don't. I think that if you were to do something that's going to be crazy, that's what it would be. That's what crazy would look like, is if you were to trade that, and not crazy in the a bad decision way, but crazy as in, we've decided that this is just not going to work. And I feel
are you talking a starter? Trading
likely, yeah. I mean, I think that's what you'd have to do if you want to go that direction. I'm not saying that they are going to, but I know you talked about you wrote a really long piece about tanking in the NBA and all, kind of the stigma of that, and is it good or bad, or what, how do you do it, why do you do it, when do you do it, who's doing it. But I think that would be, yeah, you would have to trade it. I don't think you're going to get a player or a draft pick in return that's going to make any difference unless you do trade a starter. Again, I think that LaMarcus is such a separate issue in that. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with that, but again, I think they're going to make the playoffs. I'm fairly confident in that, especially if and when they get LaMarcus back. As we saw, a lot of times they just have enough talent on the floor between him and Lillard and Lopez and really just, I guess, that starting unit. They have enough to sort of stumble in. It might not be pretty, but I think the more realistic question here, Dave, is say they stumble into the playoffs, which I think is a more realistic expectation at this point rather than completely missing it. Say they stumble into the playoffs and they get swept in the first round. I mean, that to me seems like it's a much more difficult decision, because now you're like, well, we did make the playoffs, so technically we met our preseason expectations, but the way we did it at the end of the year was not a positive way to end things off. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. If I think that seems like a more realistic hypothetical.
Yeah, I don't think it makes a difference either, whether they're swept or whether they lose 4-2. I guess maybe losing 4-3 on a last-minute shot might change the emotion of it a little bit, and obviously winning a series would change things. But I don't think these decisions operate on emotion. I think that this has been coming down the track for a long time. I suspect the Blazers already know what they think of LaMarcus Aldridge. I think Aldridge has been feeling out this whole time whether he wants to enter free agency, and it would have taken something extraordinary to change his mind one way or the other. We don't know which way he's leaning or which way he's thinking at this point, but I don't think what happens over the next month is going to change either perception, unless that thing is quite radical, like getting to the second round or getting to the conference finals. That changes the outlook. That would be a breath of fresh air. Otherwise, it seems like the train is on the track, and it's starting to slow down now, and you know pretty much where it's going to end up. Then everybody has to decide what to do after the ride, and I don't think anything that happens in the last quarter of the trip is going to change people's minds when they get to their destination.
So, I mean, is that essentially saying that if they miss the playoffs, missing the playoffs is the same as losing in the first round?
I would say, for the most part, with the exception of a really exciting, competitive, thrilling first round against a fantastic opponent that goes right down to the wire, right? But losing 4-2 in the first round emotionally will be quite different for all of us than missing the playoffs. But in terms of those decisions that you make as a general manager, as a player, as a coach, as a what have you, when you're talking about the next, I guess 1 year of this franchise, but Olshey has to think beyond that. But remember, everybody's contracts are coming up after next season, which may also affect how he wants to deal with Aldridge. Who knows? A playoff series here or there won't change that. Right? Nor for the players probably will it, because, for instance, in Aldridge's case, he's not just thinking with a 1 year window. He's thinking the next 5-6 years of his career, or at least 3 or 4, which comprises basically the rest of his prime. And he has to ask himself, do I want to spend all the rest of my prime years here, or do I want to go somewhere where I think the grass is greener right now? And when you're making that kind of decision, I don't think missing the playoffs or losing 4-2 in the first round alters too much.
I'm curious too, Dave. This is the question is so much. I guess it's hard to put into words too because it's such a weird situation that they're in because they do have that reset button. 2015 can be there, or is it? It's 2015, right?
Yeah.
That everything's gone, other than one or two guys. So
yeah, Nicola Batum, Damian Lillard, and your younger rookies that you just acquired.
right.
Mhm.
So, but at the same time, this summer they don't have that draft pick. So as you've talked, very vocally about, they can drop the bomb and blow this whole thing up, not this coming summer, but the next summer.
Mhm.
However, if they don't make the playoffs, I mean, do they, or if, as you said, if it is true that the team's perception or the perception of the team by management is the same, whether they make or they win a playoffs, or excuse me, if they lose a playoff series versus they don't make the playoffs at all,
Mhm.
do you then, do you just, at that point, do you just sort of have to suffer through 2014 and the summer of 2014 and think this is kind of a 2-year reset and we're just going to try to do the best we can? I mean, is that something that, I guess, it's such a weird thought to think that,
Right.
well, it's a weird thought to think that they wouldn't even make the playoffs.
Yeah, well,
so that's the part that I think I'm stuck on right now.
Right. But the question in 2014, and they should tip their hand, and by the way, we need to watch actions and not words. I mean, there were a lot of words surrounding last summer, but the actions were pretty clear. And you can be more optimistic or pessimistic about those actions, but we're ending up in the same place either way, right? I mean, as is becoming apparent in the latter part of the season. This team is about who we thought they were. We need to watch the actions in the summer of 2014 and not the words, okay? Either the Blazers are going to make a move that improves them now, using their MLE, for instance, and maybe trading away either some young people or some expiring people for longer-term veterans. That would indicate, okay, well, they're thinking long-term, they're ready to make their move right now. An absence of those would tend to indicate that they're going to ride it out through 2014, and they are going to press that reset button. And that would also mean that for most practical purposes, probably it leans toward them not keeping Aldridge at that point. Because A, they'll have another year of mediocrity or whatever under their belt. B, he will have hit free agency at that point, and they have no control over it anymore. And C, he'll have such a big cap hold that what can you do with that remaining cap space? You certainly can't maximize it. So you'd have to let almost everybody else go if you were going to retain Aldridge. Okay, so it's a difficult situation, and it is tricky. But we need to watch what they do with Aldridge, with their MLE, with any trades, and that will show you what's upcoming.
And I mean, to go back to Cody's point, are those actions then, I mean, is it going to be pretty easy to predict what happens with Coach at that point too?
I hate to say that, out of respect for Terry Stotts. I mean, I have no inside information. And in some sense, I feel like it becomes concern trolling a little bit. Oh, I feel bad for Coach Stotts. He's going to get fired. I don't know, right? I don't know. But if I were backed up from this, not associated with the Blazers or whatever, looking at this in the pantheon of general NBA decisions, okay? It did not look great for Stotts coming into this season, given the moves they made. They gave him an incredibly young bench with incredibly speculative players, did nothing at the trade deadline to boost his great start and kind of reinforce that, and basically said, we'll take whatever happens this year. Usually when that happens, the coach is going to take some heat. The coach is going to take some blame because you're going to lose some games. And so they played the not investing right now card both last summer and at the trade deadline. What does that say about his future here? When they get ready to invest, are they going to reinvest with him? Or are they going to pat him on the head and say, you did a nice job, thank you so much, but we're going another direction because we just didn't get where we wanted to go. And when they say that, by the way, whose fault is that really? Is it Coach Stotts, or is it the way the team was constructed and the moves that were made? I think there's a lot of discussion to be had there.
Again, thanks to Cody for his very negative question today. But it was something that it's been on Blazer Minds. It's becoming more of a reality. I think so. Again, thanks to Cody for that question. BlazerSub@gmail.com, the place to send all of those emails. And that's going to do it for us today. So for Dave Deckard, I'm Sam Tung. Once again, thank you all for joining us on this edition of the Videocast. We will be back soon here on BlazersEdge.com.